Getting our live figured out here. We will get started in just a minute. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started here this morning, folks. For folks who are joining in live on Facebook and YouTube, welcome back to Facts Only Friday. Feel free to throw in the chat boxes where you're joining us from, like to get a good scope of where folks are tuning in from all across the country. Really excited to bring back USCA Facts Only Friday, where we talk about the issues that are causing the most noise in DC and give you all a chance to ask your questions and hear directly from the experts. Really excited here this morning to be kicking off this series by diving straight into one of the topics that's clogging up most of your news feeds. That would be the Farm Bill. I'd like to welcome our guests, Justina, Graff, and Daniel Feingold from the House Ag Committee, livestock experts on both sides of the committee. Good morning to you both. I'm going to kick us off here with a couple questions to get us started, and then we'll open it up to folks on our streaming platforms, and we'll add some live questions in. So I think to start us off first, got a lot of noise kind of kicking around from um, the media, and we hear a lot about this farm bill was called a skinny farm bill or Farm Bill 2.0. I'd like to hear from both of you. Justine, I'll let you go first on kind of what that means. Give some insight to folks at home what that really means for them on the ground, and maybe how it's different from past farm bills.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank y'all for having us here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with y'all. I think, for my boss, Chairman GT Thompson, he really started calling it Farm Bill 2.0 or Skinny Farm Bill after the reconciliation package that we passed last year on July 4th week. That was where we were able to include record funding for the farm safety net, record funding for the three-legged stool of animal health to help detect, prevent, and mitigate animal diseases, both here in the United States and help keep them out of the United States. So we got a lot of traditional farm bill provisions done in that reconciliation package, but there's still a lot left to do, which is why we move forward with the Farm Food National Security Act of 2026. So the way that we kind of think about it is you have everything in HR 1 that was taken care of last year. And when you look at that minus the bill that we had in 2024, that pretty much equals what you see in the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026. So a lot of that is just, full 5-year reauthorizations of, research programs, conservation programs, all of those types of things, as well as some additional policy priorities like a fix for Proposition 12, different reports and studies on the livestock side, expanded processing capacity, that type of thing.
Great, thank you. Daniel, anything to add there?
I think Justina covered it for the most part. Also, just as by way of introduction, Daniel Feingold, senior professional staff with the committee. I cover livestock, trade, and a few other issues. And thank you all for having us here today. Really appreciate it. No, I think what Justina said, obviously we have somewhat different views. I work for Ranking Member Craig on the committee for the Democrats. So we have slightly different views on HR 1 or the reconciliation bill from last year. But that covered, a lot of the spending parts of what the Farm Bill would normally be. And so it was split up into these two parts. The second part, because in reconciliation, you can't cover policy issues um, per kind of these rules that we have in Congress. Um, the second part was policy. And there was a bunch of stuff in there that we were obviously supportive of, or things that were bipartisan bills that we do like, but there were also parts that we disagreed with and that we didn't like, which is why the majority of our members did not like the bill very much. But other than that, yeah, it was basically just called, I think, Skinny Farm Bill or Farm Bill 2.0 because it split up the Farm Bill into these separate parts.
Great. Thank you both so much for that context. I think that's really helpful and really frames us kind of as we sit up here this morning. So from our folks' perspective, from a rancher standpoint, just give me a top line from your boss's perspective. What are the top three changes in this farm bill that our folks, that ranchers, cattle producers, are most likely to feel on the ground, kind of in the next 1 to 3 years? And Justina, I'll throw it to you first too.
Yeah, I think from the chairman's perspective, the things we did to support increased processing expansion and really shoring up that side of the supply chain, whether that be through the A Plus Act that was included or the Subprime Act that was styled after Thomas Massey's bill called the Prime Act. We had some grant and loan programs on the processing and food supply chain side in Title VI of the Farm Bill, as well as some guidance to help small and very small processors, stand up HACCP plans and things like that. We were really excited to have those provisions in and think that ranchers will see the benefit of those within the next couple of years. I think also, the fix for Proposition 12 has been definitely very much talked about a lot in the media recently. While of course Proposition 12 in California focuses on pork, veal, and poultry, we still view it as something that is protecting cattle ranchers in, currently and then in the future with our fix to ensure that producers only have to abide by the production standards within their own state, that they don't have to abide by production standards outside of their own state. So we think that'll provide a certainty for years to come. I think also just protecting the conservation programs, ensuring that 50% set aside remains there for livestock, increasing trade promotion funding. We were able to significantly increase funds for MAP and FMD, as well as the other trade programs at USDA. I think that'll definitely be something that helps producers on the ground. And I think too, we've long heard from the livestock industry across the board to be hands off in a lot of instances as well. And I think that is also a place where you will see an impact in the sense that you're not going to be feeling additional regulations or standards that you must comply with in this bill. So I think it's also important to talk about it from that aspect of what was kept out to ensure that y'all still have, the freedom to produce in the way that best suits your own individual operations.
Great.
I think we're going to agree on a couple of things here. Certainly on the technical assistance for HACCP plans, on helping improve access to processing. Those are all things that the Democrats are supportive of, whether that's mobile processing or just helping smaller plants or medium-sized plants get stood up so that you have those options. Overall, like Justina said, the Farm Bill tends to not have a ton of cattle or livestock specific policy, especially given that the animal health provisions were mostly done in HR 1. And like I said, there were a few good things in there that we liked. There was an authorization for a program that was broadly popular and canceled by the administration called LFPA. That doesn't have any real money attached to it. It has, money if appropriations chooses to give it. But that's a program that we heard from pretty much everybody was very popular, and it was unfortunate that the administration got rid of it. Similar to how Justina framed it, I think there was one thing that I thought was missing from the bill that didn't really get talked about, got talked about during markup, and that is any way to address reorganization and firings. As I'm sure many of you know, the staffing at local FSA and NRCS offices has been a problem for years, and then over the past year and a half now, that's really just gotten worse. No matter what programs Congress may create, or choose to fund, they're only as good as the people who are able to manage those programs and help people get access to those programs. So my boss, and I think a lot of people are really concerned that with the cuts in the past year and possibly more attrition coming this year, that USDA might be at a tipping point. I'll just give some quick numbers. USDA's Office of Inspector General put out a staffing report at the end of 2025. We had 25% attrition at APHIS, 29% at ERS, 24% at Farm Service Agency, 24% at the National Agricultural Statistics Service, and 31% at Food and Nutrition Services. And then also 35% at NIFA too, who do grants for research. So I think that's something that was not touched on in the bill, something that, everyone realizes is a concern. And we can have all these great programs and all these bipartisan things, but if there's nobody there to run those, that's something that I feel like was left out and will impact every single farmer in America and rancher.
Absolutely. Thank you for those. What provisions do you all feel like, kind of bouncing off of what Daniel had said there, taking a look at maybe what was missing in the bill, or what maybe you would have liked to see, outside of, budgetary constraints, what provisions do you all believe will be the Senate's responsibility to kind of iron out, that really matter to our folks, more specifically?
I can kick it off, at least on the livestock side. I think our team has been very aligned with Senator Bozeman's team in the livestock space. There's always individual amendments and different things that come up in our respective markups, so there may be some differences there. But overall, in the base text of, I think, what they expect to be working on, we do have very similar provisions within the livestock space. You mentioned budgetary constraints and things there. In the House, we self-impose budgetary rules where we have to pay for any increases in funding. So if we increase funding, whether it be mandatory money or discretionary money that the appropriators will fund, we have to cut that money from somewhere else to make it a budget neutral bill. The Senate does not have the same types of rules, so they have a little more opportunity when it comes to the budgetary side in terms of spending money. So whether that be on the farm side, I know there's been a lot of talk about an ag supplemental for disaster and economic assistance. I think the Senate has definitely been leading the conversation there. I think it remains to be seen if that is part of a farm bill or part of a broader supplemental package. But at least on the livestock side, I think we have been very much aligned on policy and expect it to be very similar. But again, things always come up at markup. It's anybody's guess of what could be contentious over there versus what had happened over here. But we've been happy to be pretty aligned with Senator Bozeman's team.
Yeah, probably somewhat similar comments here, but I think any disaster or farm aid supplemental will be probably the biggest point of discussion over the next coming amount of time, especially given the past couple of weeks. We've already seen a lot of letters and incoming, given the war in Iran and what that's done to both fuel and fertilizer prices. I realize that's related to cattle, but still, or ranchers, but still a bit tangential, but I think that will become louder and louder. We're going to see, probably from what's happening right now, months of delays in getting kind of fertilizer production back to where it was, even if the war were to end imminently. And so I think that farm aid will probably become, the discussion on that, louder and louder, and be one of the biggest things that they have to iron out. Other than that, I'm sure it will just be some of the other more controversial provisions that were discussed during our markup, whether that's pesticides or Prop 12. We have members who feel differently about those things. For a lot of our members, that relates more to SNAP, which I realize is not much of a priority for ranchers, but it is for a lot of them. So mitigation of what was done in HR 1 and the cuts to SNAP there will continue to be a big point of discussion that I think the Senate will have to grapple with.
Great. Thank you both for those. Got a couple questions from some folks at home. You kind of brought up the supplemental potential and disaster aid package. What would that look like to see that included in a farm bill? Is that a typical path for that kind of legislation? How does that usually move forward? What can we expect to see kind of in that space? And I'll let you go first, and Daniel, feel free to jump in afterward.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We've seen additional economic packages move in a variety of ways in recent years. We had an economic disaster assistance package move at the end of 2024 as part of the broader year-end package. We've seen the administration put out money through the FBA program. So there are definitely a number of different ways to move those types of packages. I think at least on the House side, it will be up to our leadership with the Speaker and the Majority Leader on how they want to either package those together or move them separately. Again, we have to contend with the budgetary constraints, which I think is why you've largely seen the Senate leading the conversation on this. You know, the chairman has made it no secret that he supports additional funding. We are looking at options for how we could do that on the House side. He wants to see additional funding, especially for the specialty crop industry, in that they were, not left out, but they received far less than the other guys in the admin's package. So I think we're continuing to look into that. The budgetary constraints just make it difficult, but definitely would be up to our leadership on if they want to package those in a broader package, move them separately, or let the Senate take the lead and do whatever the Senate does over there and how they decide to tackle it. So I think there's a couple of different pathways, and we're definitely looking at all options as well as continuing to weigh in with the administration about what their opportunities are to maybe top up the assistance that they have already released.
Yeah, a lot of times this stuff has to be led by the majority party. So in this case, the Republicans would have to probably take the first step here. To the speaker, as Justina said, I think one of the discussion points you're again going to see, and I realize that this is somewhat unrelated here, but everything ties into this, is that we're already getting, from the White House, it looks like a request for $200 billion war supplemental, and what that looks like. And if I have no idea what the overall appetite will be for additional spending if the president is requesting $200 billion to support the war. And I think we're in too early stages for anyone to really know the answer there. But a lot of times these disaster aid packages for farmers and ranchers get attached to other things. Sometimes they pass separately. And I think it's anybody's guess, certainly those of us here, of what the next 9 months look like in Congress. There are a bunch of things that are kind of important that are being debated right now outside of agriculture. I think number one being the war supplemental, and then also the Department of Homeland Security shutdown that's kind of been ongoing. What gets attached to those, or what moves after those, or what other vehicles, kind of legislative vehicles might be moving, will probably dictate, how if and how money could move.
Got another question here from some folks. What volume of discussion has there been about moving mandatory country of origin labeling in a farm bill? Would that legislation, from your all's perspective, need to stand on its own? We talk a little bit about, we talked to folks before the markup, how, in the House it's a little bit different because there's two bills who seek to address mandatory country of origin labeling, Congresswoman Hageman and Congressman Johnson. So if you all have any insight there on that discussion, whether it move in the package or on its own.
Sure, yeah, not something that came up in our markup. We know there's a handful of bills out there on this issue. We have been supportive of USDA's voluntary product of the USA label. We also understand that there are some folks in the industry who want to see that go further. Frankly, I think the chairman still has questions about the implementation of any mandatory standard and what that would mean for cost compliance across the board, and how that would impact maybe some of the smaller processors in dealing with compliance and changing labels and things there. But definitely happy to keep having those conversations to continue tracking how the voluntary standard is being implemented at USDA. And yeah, just to keep talking as we move to the floor and as the Senate hopefully takes up their own provision as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think since I've been working here, cool has been a point of discussion every single year and fairly regularly. our focus is somewhat split on it, which I think probably Justina's is the same, where we have Democrats who are supportive and Democrats who are opposed. And it really is, I think all of you probably know this, a regional issue. It's something that I've talked to my boss about, but haven't, it's something that she hadn't really had to deal with until she became ranker. Um, and so we haven't had she doesn't have an official position on cool. But I assume that as if Farm Bill 2.0 starts to move forward, that this will be one of the discussion points that we have to get into. And I think the Senate is probably dealing with the same thing. So I realize I'm not giving the best, most direct answer here, but that to say, I think it's an issue that will be debated. I think you'd also asked, is it better as a standalone or something that goes in a package? Um, well, at this point, because it wasn't included underlying text, it will effectively be a standalone anyway, because the only way that it would go in is through the amendment process. And so then you kind of are, it's getting put into something else, but you're still having a standalone action on it.
Absolutely. And it's something else that we've talked about on our side too, is in those bills that you all specifically are dealing with in the House, not either of them would necessarily go to ag committee first for it to be under your all's jurisdiction. So those are, um, flags from our folks as well. Another question from some folks out west. And Daniel, I'll throw this one to you first, and just feel free to jump in. What did this Farm Bill version do? Your all's text in the House. Did it seek to address any increases in LRP? Was there any LRP discussion? And if not, why not?
Um, Correct me if I'm wrong here, but in the underlying text, I don't believe so. There was an amendment by Mr. Jackson that allows producers to sell cattle outside of the standard contract window. We had no concerns with that amendment. It passed on voice vote. RP is a tool that we've always been supportive of, and I think finding ways to improve it or get even more uptake is something we're supportive of. Um, I know in the past we've had some members who wanted to do kind of additional reimbursement for LRP, things like that. I don't believe anything was in the bill that covered that. It wasn't something that we got a ton of requests on. Um, so yeah, there was the amendment by Mr. Jackson, I guess, is the short version, but there wasn't really much other than that that I'm recalling, at least, unless I'm missing something, but I don't think so.
Yeah, no, Daniel's correct. In the underlying text, there were not any provisions. We did pass the amendment he mentioned from Mr. Jackson. And the main reason why there wasn't anything in FFNS is because of what we were able to accomplish in HR1. We covered unborn losses in LIP in HR1. We increase the coverage percentage to 100% coverage for depredation by endangered species under LIP, and we also did additional coverage for D2 drought in LFP and HR1. It is another one of those things with all of those programs, because of the rules in the House. They do cost money when we make changes to them, and we do have to pay for them. And because we were able to take care of so many of those provisions within reconciliation, and I think to Daniel's point as well, we didn't hear as many requests post reconciliation on those programs. That's why you saw didn't really see anything addressed in the base text, but are happy to keep talking about those programs if there are additional requests. It really does become a budgetary issue, and I know I sound like a broken record on the budget. It is just the reality of the rules of the House that we have to contend with.
Absolutely. Believe you all touched on this a little bit. I know, Justina, you mentioned the three-legged stool, but what should cattle producers know about how the House text handles animal health and disease preparedness? And are there new or renewed funding tools or funding that we should be aware of?
Yeah, again, not to sound like a broken record on reconciliation, but we were really happy to increase funding for the three-legged stool through that product. We are now funding the three-legged stool at $233 million a year, so a really big increase from previous funding levels, which we think is very critical and timely, especially with the outbreak of New World screwworm. Within the Farm Bill, we still did additional policy changes to just address animal disease overall, we have a provision that is codifying what USDA and USTR already do, but making it clear that they should be negotiating regionalization agreements to the highest extent possible when we are making trade deals with our trading partners. While not directly a livestock program, I suppose, we included the Healthy Dog Importation Act, which would require that dogs coming into the country are healthy and have received adequate veterinary vaccinations and treatment. Again, totally recognize that it's targeted at dogs, but we also know that dogs can be carriers of diseases like ASF or other things that would be, absolutely devastating to our domestic livestock industry. We also are doing a report on what existing tools USDA has to help producers in the event of an outbreak. We know, and this really came out of high path outbreaks, but we know that, in various quarantines, producers are not allowed to move their animals or their product, even if they're not infected. And that obviously can cause a loss in revenue. So we're looking at what programs are currently available to producers who are in that type of situation, where they are in a quarantine but are not infected, and how USDA can better help support those producers. Also just reauthorizing the appropriations levels for the three-legged stool. I think that was also pretty important, doing a report on how the cattle fever tick program is working, if there are any changes that need to be made there. So, while I think the bulk of the funding and the big programs were taken care of in HR1, there's still a lot of good provisions within the base text that get at the foreign animal disease concerns.
Yeah, mostly in agreement. A lot of the stuff was covered in HR1. Democrats were supportive of those programs and increases to it. We were not supportive of where the money came from. So that money came out of SNAP and went into it. So, my boss was the co-lead on the bill to increase funding for those programs last Congress. She's very supportive of them. I think everyone realizes that prevention is much better than addressing a problem once it's here. Um, I think there wasn't really much on screwworm in there or anything. Uh, I think the one thing we're watching there, which is unrelated to the bill, is just what things look like on the southern border as we get to warmer weather, and obviously what happens with the Mexico border. Mm, I think we all need to be prepared for what the summer could look like as in regards to screwworm, and that's something that will probably have to be a lot of it will have to be done from the administration side, because they'll have to act quickly with anything that does happen. The production facility or the dispersal facility is working or is up and running, I believe now. I'm not sure if they're actually dispersing yet, but they're working on having a production facility up and running. I think it's something it's going to be difficult to deal with. And if there are things that they need help with Congress from, I think that should be something that we can all work on together.
Absolutely. We've been watching a couple of those bills on the House side. It was the Texas folks who introduced those screwworm specific bills. But agree, it seems to be that those movements will happen more on the administration side of things. Daniel, I'll pitch this one to you first. Where do you expect kind of the biggest fights and disagreements to be as this bill moves forward? What are the biggest sticking points for your folks in your caucus as it goes to the House floor or when it goes to conference in the Senate?
I think I mentioned some of them earlier, but overall, the way my boss views it is that, right, even post HR1, almost immediately, we had requests from farmers for additional assistance, and we had, obviously, our caucus feels strongly about the cuts to SNAP that were in HR1. And so my boss's kind of what she said repeatedly was that this bill just does not meet the moment, right? It was, an extension of a lot of programs. There were some small things in there that we all agree with, but overall, we kind of already had farmers who were saying things aren't working for us, and we certainly have people who are being kicked off of SNAP and who are going hungry. And so I think that those are going to be two big things, is mitigation of what HR1 did to SNAP, and then also any supplemental money for farmers. Then the other ones that are more on the policy side are pesticide preemption and Prop 12. We have members who don't want to see either of those, preemption done for either of those things. And I think those will be big points of discussion as well. And I think that some of those are bipartisan concerns too. I mean, there have been public letters with Republicans who are concerned about those as well. And I think that those are things that the House leadership is going to have to sort of figure out what they want to do with them on the policy side. The spending side will be similar, because if you do mitigations for HR1, that will score, and if you do farm assistance, that also is going to cost money. And so, to repeat what Justina's been saying, a lot of this is going to be a money question of if this stuff can get done, it's going to require some spending to happen.
Yeah, would agree with Daniel that I think, it's no secret that the Prop 12 and pesticide provisions will probably be the most controversial. There are also always random controversial provisions that are likely to pop up as we go to rules and go to the floor. I would say, on the SNAP side, I think the chairman is probably one of the most pro SNAP Republicans you will find in Congress. And the reforms that were made in HR1 focused on waste, fraud, and abuse and reforming the program to have it better serve the people who truly need it. And when we hadn't seen farm investments made in over 20 years, while we had also seen SNAP funding, really balloon, that is really the core of where our provisions came from in HR1 to kind of right size those programs. But yeah, as far as the controversial issues, would not disagree on where those sticking points will be, and of course are interested to see what additional sticking points come up as we move through the process.
Appreciate that context there. I think last question to round us out. Folks, please continue to drop those great questions in the chats, or post them on the Facebook post. Add those in the comments. What is the expected timeline for this bill to go through rules, hit the House floor? What kind of deadlines are we looking at? And just, I'll throw this one to you first.
Yeah, great question. Our leadership is meeting with the big leadership, with the speaker, with the majority leader, with those folks to try and secure floor time. The president just tweeted or truth socialed that Congress needs to get a farm bill done now. So I think that will definitely help us move along in the process. The chairman would like to see this done before we get to May. But to Daniel's point earlier, there are a lot of other things that are getting the attention of the Congress as well, whether it be the war or supplemental funding across the board, the budgetary request on the war, the SAVE Act, lots of different things that are definitely taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room. But we are pushing our leadership quite hard to get a bill on the floor as soon as possible. And again, I think the president weighing in will hopefully help us get that done sooner rather than later.
And Justina has here, that this is kind of up to their leadership. We are, as the minority party, kind of along for the ride when it comes to this part of it. We don't really have much of a say here. I mean, I do think it's a lot of other priorities that we all know about. And the other part of this is that it is an election year. And so things, once you get to kind of the middle of the summer, in election year, things kind of slow down in Congress.
Absolutely. We certainly discuss a lot with our folks when we talk about doing Hill visits and coming out to DC, that there are at least 2 months scheduled, right, where you folks will be out and doing state work periods, and not here working on things in the Capitol, but we'll be out in your states and in your districts working on those campaign pieces, and helping out your folks on that side of things. Well, I don't see any other questions from folks online. Members, you're more than welcome to continue to drop questions on Facebook, send them to me, and we'll make sure that Daniel and Justina get to see them and get some good answers right back to you. We'd just really like to thank everyone for joining us for our first revived Facts Only Friday back on USCA. Really appreciate folks joining us. Feel free to keep sending us those questions, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all having us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, Jenna. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yes, you too.
Have a good one.